On behalf of our host, Kriya Yoga Institute, and sponsors, Florida International University, Stephen J. Green School for International and Public Affairs, and the Kimberly Green Latin American and Caribbean Center, welcome to Global Mind Change, an exciting dialogue on spiritual ecology. This is the inaugural event for 4 consecutive days of panel discussions on religion, ethics, the environment, and public policy, care for our common home. I'm Andrea Seydel, Professor Emerita at Florida International University and Associate Professor of Religious Studies and Chair of Kriya Yoga Institute's 2020 Symposium. Along with our co-chair, Diana Passin de Gongora, we now introduce you to Dr. John Stack, the founding dean of FIU's Green School, who will welcome you to this illuminating and collaborative event on behalf of our many co-sponsors. Thank you for participating, and Dr. Stack.
Thank you, Andrea, for all that you've done for FIU during your distinguished career here. Good morning and welcome, everyone. I'm John Stack, the Dean of the Stephen Green School of International and Public Affairs, and it is an honor to be here with you today for an event that I hope will be both inspiring and profoundly impactful for us all. Today's symposium, Global Mind Change Dialogues on Spiritual Ecology and Transforming Individual and Planetary Consciousness, is the first of a full 4-day program focused on some of the most critical issues our planet faces. I am so pleased that FIU and the Green School are helping lead this important conversation, and I want to thank you all for taking the time to be here with us. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge and recognize our partners in this endeavor. First, the Kriya Yoga Institute, our co-host for today's Interfaith Symposium. We are also grateful for the support and for allowing us to be part of this important day. I also want to thank personally and acknowledge Dr. Andrea Seydel, Professor Emeritus in our Department of Religious Studies, who has worked so hard to bring this day together, along with the chair of the Kriya Yoga Symposium, Diana Passin de Gonzala. Today's symposium is part of a broader event, Religion, Ethics, the Environment and Public Policy, Care for Our Common Home, presented by the Kimberly Green Latin American and Caribbean Center and the FIU Department of Religious Studies. I want to thank and acknowledge President Luis Guillermo Soler, our Interim Director of LAC, and Dr. Eric Larson, our Chair of the Religious Studies Department. Many others have worked tirelessly to bring this powerful program together. Thank you to our co-sponsors who have contributed so much to the planning and organization of this day. The Ruth K. and Shepard Broad Distinguished Lecture Series, the Mohsin and Fauzia Jaffer Center for Muslim World Studies, our program in the study of spirituality, and the Global Indigenous Forum. I also want to thank the Center for Humanities in an Urban Environment, which has done really fine work programming during this pandemic. We value your contributions to this event as well. At the Green School, we seek to understand the world we live in and the challenges we face as one human family. I can think of no greater challenge to our continued existence on this planet than climate change. As with any global issue, it is critical for all societies to come together with a common vision and common purpose. I sincerely hope that today's event and the events of the next few days will contribute to a greater sense of urgency around the proper stewardship of our common home. Again, thank you again for being here, and please enjoy the program.
Thank you, Dr. Stack, for that warm welcome. I now introduce you to our moderator, Dr. John Thomas Lopatagi, Yogacharya of Kriya Yoga Institute.
Hello to all. We'd like to begin, besides welcoming you, to let you know that today's program will be simultaneously translated into Spanish and Portuguese. To find that feature, find it at the bottom of your screen under interpretation. As far as questions go, we have 3 speakers today. There will be a 5-minute period after each speaker. You can be writing in questions during the talks, and they will be read out by me. I'll read your question to each speaker. And at the very end, after the 3 speakers, there'll also be a 10-minute period where you can address questions to the different speakers. Please make sure you note which speaker it should go to, and I will read that out for you. Now, there's been a program change, an urgent program change, and I'd like to read that out to you. We have been informed that unfortunately Paramahansa Pragyanananda, after traveling from India through Europe and into the United States, has entered into a period of spiritual seclusion, silence, and fasting for the welfare of all mankind at this critical time. He will not be able to use his voice to speak to us today, but as he believes this symposium and the discussion of spiritual ecology is deeply important to all at this critical world junction, his words have been written into a special message, which he has asked his senior monk, Swami Atmavidyananda Giri, to read and also to speak in his behalf. I would like to introduce Swami Atmavidyananda Giri. I will read his bio first. Swami Atmavidyananda Giri is currently Vice President of Kriya Yoga Institute, and since 2002, he has dedicated his life full-time to spiritual practice, lecturing and teaching throughout the world, presiding over numerous interfaith conferences. Born in Bhopal, India, he completed a degree in mechanical engineering before he was initiated into Kriya Yoga in 1994 in India, and ordained a monk in the Giri monastic order in 2009. Swami Atmavidyananda Giri is fluent in 6 languages and is an erudite scholar of both Eastern and Western scriptures, with an expertise in ancient Vedic ritual ceremony and yoga practices, astrology, and the Sanskrit literature of ancient and modern Hinduism. So without further ado, I ask for Swami Atmavidyananda Giri to please read his talk. And remember, everyone, the simultaneous translations into Spanish and Portuguese, you can find that at the bottom of your screen. Thank you very much. Swamiji, can you please begin?
Thank you, Baba. So first, let me share the message from Guruji. He has given the message. I offer my love and adoration to all the saints, sages, and prophets of humanity, and one God of all religion. I offer a special bow to Paramahansa Yoganandaji, the brilliant master of Kriya Yoga and a sincere lover of God and his creation. Loving, learned, and honorable speakers, moderator, and respected audience, I offer my heartfelt love and oneness to all of you. On the occasion of celebrating the 100 years of Paramahansa Yoganandaji's coming to the West, bringing global unity, I offer my thanks and gratitude to all of you. Along with FIU and its authorities for co-hosting this Interfaith Symposium and Dialogue on Spiritual Ecology, I offer my prayer for all who are suffering on our planet Earth and pray for their healing, which includes plants, animals, humans, the earth, and the ecology. My dear ones, first I tender my unconditional apology for not being able to take an active part in this dialogue. But in my mind, spirit, and heart, I am participating silently. My love and prayer are subtly present with all of you. My loving ones, God is the creator. For any creation that we see in the world, there is a need of matter and intelligence. Suppose we want to cook some food. For this, we need a cook along with the cooking ingredients, utensils, and other items. In the creation, there is an exception. The creator is both the material cause and the intelligence. In one word, everything is God, both matter and maker. I see God in all and all in God. Since we are having this program in honor as well as in memory of Paramhansa Yoganandaji, I would like to reference two chapters of his famous autobiography of Yogi book. One chapter is on the Indian scientist named Sir Jagdish Chandra Bose, and the other is about Luther Burbank, an American horticulturist. Both of them have proved the play of consciousness in plants through their scientific experiments. Luther Burbank was even able to change the nature of plants by communicating with them in love. The Vedas speak of divinity as Sat Chit Ananda. Whatever exists is Sat, truth. And there is the play of consciousness, which is Chit. And this entire creation is for bliss or Ananda. God permeates everything and everywhere. Paramahansa Yoganandaji once said, consciousness is sleeping in the stones, is dreaming in plants, and waking up in animals, and playing with its infinite possibilities in humans. We all are one and united with one spirit of love and divinity. It is time to perceive this ever-expanding consciousness everywhere, and we all should live a life of consciousness and love, with perception of unity, amity, and harmony in the entire creation. I bow to all of you. Thank you. So we are going to talk about spiritual ecology. I bow to living power of God and all the masters of all times and places within you all. Good morning to you all. The ancient Vedas have several references on environmental protection, ecological balance, weather cycles, rainfall phenomena, hydrologic cycle, ozone layer, and related subjects that directly indicate the high level of awareness of our ancient seers and people of that time. In Vedic viewpoint, there are beautiful teachings everything is presence of God. Veda believes that creation and creator are not separate, they are same. Everything in Vedic culture is personified, like earth, rivers, cows, they are considered as mothers. there is a mutual respect for forces of nature, and we worship them as divine. Everything is being permeated by consciousness or prana, and there is no division of I and you, mine and thine, me and mine. Veda teaches us attitude of gratitude for all. So how does it work? Everything is presence of God. If we look at this creation, we find that in Rig Veda, there is a mantra. We call it Purusha Sukta, Vedic hymn to cosmic being. Sa bhumim vishwato vrattva. One who has created is pervaded in this whole creation. So this universe is none but the body of cosmic being. We call it Virat Purusha. If you read the Holy Bhagavatam, there's a beautiful mantra, Kham Vayum Agnim Salilam Mahim Cha Jyotinshi Sattvani Dishodrumadin Sarit Samudranscha Hare Shariram Yatkincha Bhutam Pranameda Anyanyaha. Means I bow to sky, air, water, earth, fire, and all the heavenly bodies, living beings, cardinal points, trees, and the like. Even the rivers, seas, all the beings are there, and considering them as the body of the Lord, with devotion, I bow to them. So this is the concept. And if we go further, in the Atharva Veda, there is a beautiful mantra where we consider this Mother Earth. She is the mother. In the lap of Mother Earth, we all are living, we all are playing, and one day we go back to Mother Earth when we are buried or cremated. So Atharva Veda says, Mata Bhumi Putro Aham Prathivyaha. This earth is the mother, and all the plants, animals, humans are her children. We are taught in the early morning, when we get up from our sleep, we are taught to pray to Mother Earth, looking at our palms, and then we pray. And our prayer is that, oh Mother Earth, please forgive me for putting my feet on you because it will hurt you. So this is the Vedic culture. In the present time, we have poisoned Mother Earth's body with fertilizers, chemicals. Due to our selfishness, we have drained her natural resources and depleted her body for the sake of earning maximum profit. Similarly, Rig Veda mentions about the forest goddess, we call Vanadevi, and many healing properties of the plants are mentioned in Rig Veda, Atharva Veda also. I remember as a child, even when we used to go to pluck a flower or some leaves from a plant, we were taught to pray to the tree, asking for the permission to take some flowers, take some leaves. There are many sacred plants in Hindu tradition which are worshipped regularly. For example, holy basil, tulsi, rudraksha, banyan, peepal, shami are the most religious plant species. It is scientific study has shown that tulsi, peepal, and neem, also aloe vera plant, they release oxygen 24 hours. And that is why trees were always part of our culture. In Rig Veda and Atharva Veda, you can find beautiful mantras about the plants and trees. It says, do not cut trees because they remove pollution. One should not destroy the trees. Atharva Veda says, the peepal tree is the permanent seat of God. So even in tree, we perceive divinity. And one should always pray to the food. It comes from Mother Earth. No one should disturb the habitat of wild animals. Also, trees should not be disturbed during night time because of the presence of God's soul in the tree trunk. And such rules are mentioned in Manusmriti, the law book of Manu. Animals also are vahanas or vehicles of our gods and goddesses in Hinduism and are equally worshipped as their deities. For example, we call Lord Ganesha, so his carrier is mouse. Lord Vishnu, the celestial eagle, is his carrier, and so on. So even the animals are worshipped, considering them divine. Cow is the mother. Cow is not animal in Vedic culture. Cow is mother. How can we destroy or exploit our mother? Also, we offer water and salutation to sun god, who is the source of life energy. Offering water to sun in the morning is not just a ritual, but it is a science to maintain nature's cycle. And how to live in harmony? Again, Veda gives us beautiful instruction that whatever we see here, it is all power of God. So, Indram Mitram Varunam Agnim Ahuratho Divya Sa Suparno Garutman Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti Agni Yamam Matarishwanam Ahu. This is the mantra from Rig Veda, very often quoted in Interfaith Dialogs, that various powers of Supreme like sun, rain, water, fire, air themselves are as deities, and their names are mentioned as Mitra, Varuna, Agni, Garutman, Yama. But God is one, and in all these different forms or forces of nature, we worship one divinity in different names and forms. Therefore, according to their qualities and deeds, we should worship that Supreme in this nature. Then further, it says, Veda also teaches the attitude of gratitude for all. We receive everything from nature for our sustenance. Therefore, we should be grateful to the nature. And everything is permeated by the power of God, which is mentioned again in the Upanishad. Mundak Upanishad says, Prano hi eshaha sarva bhutaihi vibhati. It is again from Atharva Veda. Truly, it is life that shines forth in all beings. And Yajurveda Ishopanishad mantra says, Isha vasyam idam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat pena tyaktena bhunjitha ma gradha kassa sviddhanam. In this universe, whatever exists, whether moving or non-moving, is pervaded by power of divine. Therefore, enjoy everything with the attitude of detachment, attitude of renunciation. So there is no division of I and you. There is all pervading divinity. So there is oneness between the creator, creation, and the creation. So we are living on the earth planet. We belong to one power of God and we are not separate. If we analyze, we can see easily that all the problems stem from the idea of possession and ownership. For example, if a bank manager thinks that all the money deposited in the bank belongs to him, you can imagine what would happen to him. Remember, we are not the owner, but we are caretaker. We are managers of this creation and we have to manage it well. So all the objects of the world are given to us by God as a gift for our betterment and development. So we must enjoy these objects with the attitude of non-possessiveness. So this is the solution for present crisis, because we think that we are the owner, and that is where problem starts. So the mantra says also to be content. Ma gradaha kasyas vidhanam. Don't become greedy for wealth of others. So be content and share whatever is given by God. When we don't feel oneness with nature and all lives on the earth planet, treating them as inert matter, we are tempted to possess, exploit, and destroy them. We abuse them instead of using for our sustenance. My spiritual master very often said that you cannot take your own hand and bite because you identify yourself with your hand and consider it as your integral part of body. So it has a profound meaning. So solution to present crisis of climate change and global warming and related problems is to change our perception and our approach to nature, respecting it as divine and conscious. We need to simplify our lives and stop wasting natural resources. The modern development model of society and the world is completely opposed to the viewpoint given by the Vedic sages. And it has led us to reckless abuse of nature and maximum exploitation of its resources. The present crisis of environment degradation is the direct result of this merciless exploitation and ravishment of nature. As long as a sense of love and respect for nature is not developed, all materialistic efforts of environment protection would remain superficial and futile. For ecology to be truly saved and revived, we have to return to the meanings and practices that infuse sacredness and reverence towards nature as we learned in Vedic culture. We have to reawaken our relationship with nature and not view religion and ecology as separate. Let us change our mindset and start perceiving nature as our own part to save the Mother Earth and make this creation more beautiful, more loving, and harmonious. Thank you all.
Thank you, Swamiji. Due to time constraints, we will go right to Dr. Nelson. I have received no questions yet for Swami Atmavidyananda. If people have questions, they will go into the last segment. We have a 10-minute segment after the three speakers. You please send the questions here and I will address it directly to him. Now, I've also received a message that if anyone is using an iPad or tablet, the interpretation function to have the simultaneous translation would be at the right-hand corner under the More tab. I would like to introduce Dr. Melissa K. Nelson. She's a member of the Anishinaabe tribe, and she's an ecologist, professor of indigenous sustainability at Arizona State University, and president of the Cultural Conservancy, an organization dedicated to indigenous rights and revitalization. Dr. Nelson is a Switzer Fellow, an Environmental Leadership Award recipient, and co-producer of the award-winning documentary film called The Salt Song Trail, Bringing Creation Back Together. Her edited anthology, called Original Instructions, Indigenous Teachings for a Sustainable Future, focuses on the persistence of traditional ecological knowledge by contemporary Native communities. Her work is dedicated to Native biocultural diversity, ecological ethics, and the renewal of community health and cultural arts. So without further delay, I would like to ask for Dr. Nelson to please join the conversation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you, dear Swami, for that beautiful introductory comment. So many common elements in terms of honoring the sacredness in nature from so many different traditions. I'm happy to be here with you all today on this auspicious time of autumn equinox and the changing of the seasons, of equal day and equal night. And now the nights will be growing longer and the days shorter. Very auspicious sacred time for many Native American tribes. And I will introduce myself in my Anishinaabe language. Bujun Ndinoe Maganatuk, Melissa Nelson Indigenous, Makunzi Gabawi Kidash Nindigo, Nin Anishinaabe Ikwe, Piju Dodame, Mikanak Wajiwing, Nindunji Ba, Amiu Miigwech. I said greetings to you, my relatives. My name is Melissa Nelson. My Ojibwe or Anishinaabe name is Makunzi Gabawik. I'm a proud member of the Turtle Mountain Chippewa tribe and a member of the Lynx clan, and I'm very happy to be with you today. I do have some images to show to you, so I'm going to try to share that right now. All right. Today we're going to be talking about global mind change from conquest to kinship consciousness. I think this is a critical topic, and as Swami outlines some of the beautiful consciousness of earth honoring traditions from his tradition, I will also mention those from my tradition. Can you see this slide, honoring my native lands and peoples? Yeah. Great. I want to acknowledge again the Native peoples that I come from. I'm very honored to be a member of these tribes, and I've been a learner of the language of Anishinaabe Cree from the North American Center of Turtle Island in the North Dakota area on the border with Manitoba in Canada. There are over 564 tribes in the United States, so we are very diverse and every tribe has its own unique tradition. I come from the ancestral waters from this geographical area, and we honor our mother lands. We honor the lands that we come from and the waters that we come from. So these are the areas that my ancestors come from: the St. Lawrence River, the Great Lakes, Lake Winnipeg, the Red River of the North. I am also mixed race. My father is Norwegian, so I'm always balancing the colonizer and the colonized within myself, and always embracing those multiple ways of viewing the world and seeing the world and trying to reconcile them for greater harmony in our world. My personal waters come from a place in Northern California where I was born and raised, on the lands of the Yuki and the Sinkyone and the Wailaki people. Very proud California Native people who sadly have had a very devastating history due to colonization. I also honor and recognize the lands of where I am from and give tribal land acknowledgements to the Coast Miwok territory in Northern California. That is the land of the Federated Indians of the Great Rancheria, a sovereign nation. And why do I do this? I do this because as Indigenous peoples, we always honor the land on where we come from and the land on where we live, to honor the sacredness of Mother Earth wherever we find ourselves. And here in North America, there are many, many diverse nations, from the north, the south, the east, the west. For us, this is a great turtle. It comes from our creation stories that talk about the emergence of a beautiful turtle when all the earth was water. And this is a sacred origin story to us that unites the people of the Americas. And the turtle, I know, has very sacred significance to many other peoples around the world. At this time of fall harvest in our Ojibwe calendar, this is the leaves falling moon, or this is the corn harvest moon. It is a time of abundance. It is a time of honoring the gifts of sacred food from Mother Earth, a time of harvesting corn and beans and seeds. Sometimes the hunters go out and hunt at this time, fishing. It's a time to bring in the bounty of the land and prepare for the winter. Some of you may be in the southern southern hemisphere where you're preparing for spring and the leaves are coming out. And we are deeply tied to these seasonal cycles of the changes in Mother Earth, and to pay attention to what's happening with the plants and the animals and the migrations at this time of turning. We again reflect on the beautiful bounty of food and honor our sacred foods. For many Native Americans, that's corns, beans, and squash. We call these the three sisters that work harmoniously together. They're very, very different, and yet they are deeply entwined and symbiotic. They give to each other. They give shelter, they give moisture, they give water, they give nitrogen in the soil, they give nutrients. For us, the three sisters are a perfect metaphor for interfaith work and a perfect metaphor for intercultural dialogue, because we are all unique. A corn doesn't try to become a squash, and a squash doesn't try to become a bean. We all have our own sovereign entities, and yet we contribute and share with each other in a more holistic and beneficial way. So I want you all to reflect. I know we have people from all over the world with us today, and I honor wherever you are. And who are the indigenous peoples on whose land you are on? It would be good to really look and examine that. And where are their living descendants today, and what are their visions for the future? Sadly, many people think Native Americans or indigenous people are just in the past, but we are contemporary people and we are future people. And it's always very important to recognize the first peoples of the land who lived sustainably in these ecosystems for hundreds and thousands of years before colonization. This is a great website that you can go to and find out about the indigenous peoples on the lands where you live and work. So today we're talking about global mind change, and how do we remember and embrace a sacred ecology and live as if we are a part of it, and how we need to transform from an ideology of conquest and consumption to one of kinship and mutual support. So we need to talk about this today because there are many converging global crises that we are facing. We know that there is climate chaos. Here in California, we're suffering from devastating fires and smoke. I know in Florida in the South, you have torrential rains and flooding and winds. We have reached what ecologists say are tipping points. And in many ways, we are beyond these tipping points with carbon in the atmosphere, and many different boundaries have been surpassed. We're facing the greatest rate of species extinction we've ever seen, all at the hands of humans. We are seeing water and food insecurity. There are over 1 billion people on the planet who are starving, and yet 1 billion people are obese. We're seeing incredible imbalances. There's outrageous racial injustices happening. And fortunately, the move for Black Lives Matters here in America and around the world is trying to address these deeper issues of racial injustice. We're seeing major economic instability, with the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. We see political tumult happening with politicians and governments. But all of these are really just symptoms of a deeper malady or of deeper issues. And I think there are many different sources to this global crisis we're in. There's many different theories. It'd be good to hear what you all think. What are the ideas or the roots of this global crisis? We are in what poet Gary Snyder calls the post-industrial pre-collapse. Others say the apocalypse is upon us. What does that word apocalypse mean? It has many different roots in the Bible and in Revelations, but the root meaning of the word is to no longer conceal, to no longer hide. So to be an apocalypse means things that have been hidden are coming to the surface. And I think that's actually a very important thing to rebalance right now. Many of my Native elders say we are living in prophetic times. We are living in time of prophecy. And again, for us, a prophecy is a gift given to us by the gods or goddesses, a vision that someone has seen of the future. And we have many prophecies that talk about this time of great crisis in the world. So we're in a time when the broken parts of our world are being revealed. And I think they are being revealed so that we can heal them and we can repair them together. So how do we as common people intelligently and compassionately respond and act in times of such turmoil? What can we do to transform our individual and planetary consciousness? Chief Oren Lyons has said that there will be no peace on earth until we end the war on Mother Earth. And Bishop Bill Swing of the United Religions Initiative says, there will be no peace among nations until there is peace among religions. So we have some big tasks at hand, and it is truly a time for a global mind change to transform how we are relating to the earth and to each other, and especially in terms of respect for diverse peoples and their unique traditions. As Robin Kimmerer astutely shares, she is a Potawatomi botanist and scientist. Yes, we need to restore the earth, but equally, if not more important, we need to restore our relationship to the earth. This is what has been broken here on Turtle Island due to over 500 years of colonization, and in other areas around the world due to similar ruptures and injustices that have sadly broken many of these rich earth-honoring traditions. We indeed need the global mind change, one from conquest, domination, and greed, to one that is focused on kinship, reciprocity, and generosity. Many of the original instructions and values embedded in a lot of world religions and spiritual practices. The conquest consciousness focuses on fragmentation, division, and domination. It sadly manifests as greed and materialism and a type of black and white binary thinking. It is represented in the hierarchical abuse of power that we sadly see in patriarchy, white supremacy, extractivism, and the commodification of the sacred. Whether that's the genetic modification of our seeds, human trafficking, or in other types of abuses. Sadly, most of us have been impacted in one way or another by this conquest consciousness. And it's very important that at this day and age, we decolonize our minds and hearts from these values that have so infected and damaged the world. In our Anishinaabe oral tradition, we have stories about this dangerous conquest consciousness, embodied in a greedy, frightening monster that we call Wendigo. The late Lenape scholar Jack Forbes writes about this in his book, Columbus and Other Cannibals, and Potawatomi author Robin Kimmerer writes about this frightening spirit in her wonderful book, Braiding Sweetgrass, and in other writings. Robin powerfully writes about the current Wendigo in chief. He is the obscene of the Anthropocene, the colon of colonization, the grinder of salt into the original wound of this country. But lest I spend any more time in cathartic name calling, let me say that Wendigo is the name for that which cares more for itself than anything else. It shrieks with unmet want, consumed with consumption. It lays waste to humankind and our more than human kin. This is our modern challenge, to decolonize ourselves, our country, and our world, to banish this Wendigo conquest consciousness and embrace a worldview and lifestyle of kinship and generosity. As Robin Kimmerer continues, you and us all right now can set aside the mindset of the colonizer and become native to place once again. You can choose to belong.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nelson.
I'm not quite done yet. I was trying to get another slide up, sorry. Let me try now. All right, I think I have 5 or 10 minutes left. So I talked about the problem. I need to talk about the solution here. We need to think about community and to really transform an individualistic worldview to a community-centric worldview. And this will happen by going back to our original instructions and going upstream to really think of the root causes and root solutions to this global mind change. Our original instructions teach us about sacred ecologies. And I'd like to introduce a concept proposed by a wonderful colleague, Enrique Salmon, who talks about a kin-centric worldview. We need to move beyond our anthropocentric worldview to a kin-centric worldview, one that knows that we are all related. We have embedded in our cosmovisions and creation stories many stories that give us the teachings about what it means to be a good relative, to be a good human being, to treat Mother Earth with kindness. We need to move beyond our rational minds to embrace our metaphoric minds and a holistic embodied approach again, to get out of only our rational thinking and understand the wisdom of the heart and of the body. We need to embrace active participation with natural processes, that we are part of ecosystems. We are part of the water cycle. We are part of energy flows. We are not separate, above, or superior to them. We have to trust our time-tested land management practices of reciprocity through ceremony and prayer and gratitude, as Swami really talked about. We need to think intergenerationally, honor the 7 generations of ancestors that gave us life, and honor and think of 7 generations in the future, that we leave Mother Earth in a better place than we inherited it. We must practice the precautionary principle, do no harm, and we must anticipate unintended consequences, because humans have a way of thinking the best, but creating situations that we do not intend. How do we minimize harm? And to understand that the land has eyes. We live in moral landscapes where natural law is primary, not man-made law, and that we must harmonize again with the natural laws of the universe. I'm very lucky to work with Hawaiian teachers and elders who have a beautiful proverb. The land is chief and we are its servants. The land is chief and we are its servants. In our Ojibwe tradition, we honor the 7 sacred directions, the 4 cardinal directions, earth below, sky above, and the center, the balance, the mystery within all of us that unites all of us. We also honor our 7 grandfathers and grandmothers' teachings that are all related to our animals, that are our teachers. Wisdom comes from the beaver, truth from the turtle, humility from the wolf, love from the eagle, bravery from the bear, respect from the buffalo, and honesty from the raven, who's always talking to us. In our Anishinaabe tradition and many, many native traditions, we have prophecies. We have a 7th fire prophecy. And it's very long, it takes days sometimes to share, but in a nutshell, we are at a crossroads right now. After 6 fires, we are now in the 7th fire. And we are at a turning point, a crossroads between a green path or a scorched earth path. And today, at this time, Native people cannot move forward without the help of all humankind. It is at this time that the light-skinned race will be given a choice between 2 roads. If they choose the right road, then the seventh fire will light the eighth and final fire, an eternal fire of peace, love, brotherhood, and sisterhood. If the light-skinned race makes the wrong choice of roads, then the destruction which they brought with them in coming to this country will come back to them and cause much suffering and death to all of the Earth's people. And we believe we are in this prophetic time. We are at this crossroads right now, and we need all of us to do what we can to decolonize from the conquest consciousness and embrace a kinship consciousness. We must become eco-literate and native and fluent to our places. And one of the great sources of policy and law for this is to familiarize yourself with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. If Indigenous peoples are healthy and well, all beings will be healthy and well. And it discussed foundational human rights, the rights to life and security, the rights to culture, religion, and language, the rights to your own forms of education and indigenous ways of knowing, media, and work, political and economic rights, and also lands, territories, and resources. So I thank you so much for this opportunity to share about the work of Indigenous peoples to have a global mind change and embrace a paradigm of kinship and reciprocity for all beings. All my relations, ho, mitakuyasin, chimigwech, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nelson. We have, by the way, we have numerous requests for your slide, for your PowerPoint to be available as a slideshow for everyone to use later on. We have numerous requests for the websites you show and all of this. We have time to give you one quick question. How do we research the lands we originated from? Will these sessions, no, okay, let's just stop there. Will these sessions be recorded and available later? But how do we research the lands we originated from?
I gave a website. You can go to nativeland.ca or nativeland.org, and we can help you with that. There are many maps that show the first peoples of the land where you come from. There are maps that show migrations of Indigenous people and, you know, folks who lived in diaspora. We are all moving around. Native people also moved around quite a bit, and yet we have our sacred core lands where our tribal territories are located. For example, mine is in the center of North America in the Turtle Mountains. Others for the Lakota, it's the Black Hills in South Dakota. So wherever you are, you can find out the first peoples of the lands that you live on or where you come from. And your own ancestral waters, whether you're Dutch or Jewish or, you know, Indonesian, wherever you come from, you can find your migrations through your family tree and your family lineage. It's very important to understand your ancestors' lines and where you come from. So thank you for asking. And you can email, I'll make some of these websites and tools available through the symposium. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As we're trying to keep on schedule today. Swamiji has been kindly answering a number of questions that have been sent to him through back through the chat, and we appreciate that. We'll have more questions for you also, Swamiji, at the end of that last 10-minute period, and also for you, Dr. Nelson. But now, without delay, I would like to introduce our third speaker, Dr. Seyyed Hossein Nasr. Dr. Seyyed Hossein Nasr is a world-renowned scholar and philosopher on Islam and is currently university professor at George Washington University. Dr. Nasr graduated from MIT with an undergraduate degree in physics and mathematics, and he studied geology and geophysics at Harvard University, where he completed a PhD in the history of science and philosophy. A recipient of the Templeton Religion and Science Award, Dr. Nasr has published over 50 books and 500 articles in numerous languages, including Persian, English, French, and Arabic. Dr. Nasr speaks and writes on such diverse subjects as philosophy, religion, spirituality, music, art, architecture, science, literature, and the natural environment. And his talk is entitled Nature as Theophany, Reflections on the Environmental Crisis. So, we invite Dr. Nasr to please join our talk today, and I will pass the word over to him. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Being a Muslim, I always begin my lectures with invoking the name of God. We have a saying that in the name of the creator of all things, the creator of existence. And with that, I begin. I'm very glad to be able to participate, even if it's for a few minutes, in your very important program. And I say this as a person who's been a veteran in this field and involved with environmental crisis before some of the people who are speaking today were even born. Going back to the 1960s, the Rockefeller Series lectures I gave at the University of Chicago, which came out of Man and Nature, which came out 6 months before the article of Lynn White on the historical roots of our ecological crisis, and also giving the first Earth Day lecture in Stockholm in 1971, and participated in numerous conferences, East and West, with Strong and others in the early movement for the environment. So it's a field that I've been devoted to for over half a century. But today, because my time is so short, I want to tailor my comments to the Islamic world, but I will say a few words in general. The environmental crisis began in the West. To say that the goats were eating trees in Syria 2,000 years ago and trying to draw a line between that and the creation of the Ruhr Valley and Lowell in the Industrial Revolution is really to miss the point completely of the reality of what took place. If the goats in Syria were just eating the trees and still doing the same without factories all over the world belching smoke into the air, we would not be having a carbon dioxide crisis that we have now. So I am very much opposed to that belittling of the event that took place that brought about the Industrial Revolution, which in turn brought about the environmental crisis in which we live. And as a person who studied both science and Oriental philosophies, especially Islamic, I'm very disconcerted by the fact that many very well-intended people in the West who are very much interested in the environment, nevertheless do not realize that in order to solve the environmental crisis, we have to change the whole paradigm of modern science and technology. We cannot function within that paradigm, try to create a solution to the problem created by the paradigm. And this takes a brave soul of first-rate mind and also a brave soul to do, but it's something that has to be done. And I'm very sad to see that sometimes people spend all their energies trying to find solution to effects without trying to find solution to the causes which bring those effects about. And so I want to begin with those general comments and say that also throughout the world, of different ethnic groups, different political structures, from monarchies to communist countries, from Saudi Arabia to China and everything in between. But there's one thing in which all countries are united in, especially governments, that's in the destruction of the environment. That's the only thing that unifies all governments of the world. Let's be honest with each other. Whether you come from Albania or the United States or Argentina or Russia or China or India, which is the land of Mahatma Gandhi, look what's happening there environmentally. The one thing that we all on the governmental level, there's an agreement about is the destruction of the environment. And so the reaction to that has to come from individuals, from small groups, from NGOs, from teachers, from writers. And thank God from that point of view, there are now a number of groups, both in East and West, which are doing that. And in the same way that in medicine, usually you'll find a treatment for an ailment where the ailment came about. In this field also, it's very interesting that the first quest for a solution to the environmental crisis came from the part of the world which had the most role to play in the creation of the environmental crisis. The first environmentalists really were those young kids in the streets of San Francisco who began the hippie movement on the West Coast of the United States. They didn't have my knowledge, but had this intuition that something is seriously wrong with the world in which they lived. And many of them came from very wealthy families. They were not children of the poor. Fathers and mothers who had several cars and industrialists and big houses and wasted energy like God knows how, only God knows how. But they were people who became aware, and gradually the movement, the only movement in history that's significant, that came from west to east in this way. All great movements, all religions, all will travel from east to west, all great medieval philosophies and so forth. But this is a movement that began from California, from the western part of the United States, then came to the eastern part of the United States, then came to Northern Europe, to Sweden and other places, and took several decades for it to get to Southern Europe, and then gradually came to the Islamic world and India and other places. Before I turn to Islam, I just want to add this one sentence. When the environmental movement began, the attitude that was taken by Asian countries and African countries was the following. They said, you people in the West mangled, destroyed, usurped the environment in every way that you could in order to get rich. Now that it's our turn, you tell us not to do so. We're not going to pay attention to you. We'll wait until we are as rich as you are, then let's deal with the problem, which is, of course, a form of suicide. But the argument was very strong, very, very strong. Why was it that when the English were polluting the Charles River, or the New York State people were polluting the Hudson River, there was no one in India tell them not to do so? Even across the Atlantic and Africa, where the pollution of the Hudson River used to go all the way past the Azore Islands to near the African coast before it was cleaned up in the 1950s. Why was it that nobody was saying anything? This was a historical situation, very difficult to answer. Very, very difficult to answer. When I gave the keynote address at the first Earth Day in Stockholm, the big delegation from the Islamic world, from the Indian world, and also big delegation from China and Russia, who, however, did not accept this. They said this is a capitalistic problem, not a communist problem. But when I said these things, they got up and walked out. When I said it's really a global issue, and I said right before the Russian Soviet delegation, I said, look, the Volga River is the most communist river in the world. It flows for 900 kilometers within what was then the Soviet Union, and flows into the Caspian Sea. And when sturgeon, which gives caviar, are grown in the north, as soon as they're old enough, they swim and come to the Persian coast. You cannot find a more communist river than the Volga, but look what it's doing to the pollution of the Caspian Sea. Things like that were very, very difficult for the big communist states to understand. And the third world did not want to participate. This is not our problem. So in the Islamic world, we begin with a very difficult background. I happen to be a Persian, an Iranian. I now reside in the United States, but I was living in Iran for decades. Of course, I was born there and brought up there. And when the environmental crisis began, I was sort of at the forefront of it, traveling to San Francisco all the time, giving the lecture at the Grace Cathedral and so forth and so on. So it has a whole history, talking to these hippies in the streets of San Francisco. I tried to start an environmental movement in Iran. Unfortunately, with the help of authorities and the Queen, and later on with the support of the brother of the Shah, who was a hunter but understood the importance of wildlife and so forth. Anyway, Iran became the first country in the Islamic world to have a Department of Environmental Studies. The Deputy Prime Minister, who died recently, was in exile here in Washington, was designated to head the department for dealing with environmental studies. Several national parks were created, but in the rest of the Islamic world, very little attention was paid. When the Iranian Revolution took place, they said, oh, this was all the problem of the royal regime, and they kicked people out of their villages to let animals, rare deer, let's say, roam around, and they destroyed the national parks, and a lot of the rare animals in Iran were killed. A catastrophe, absolute catastrophe. Then when Hashemi Rafsanjani became president of Iran, he reconstituted the environmental movement, and especially the national parks, and tried to have a program. And since the 1970s or thereabouts, many Islamic countries have tried to have environmental movements. Even a country like Egypt, which is overpopulated, facing abject poverty and many great economic problems, there are very strong environmental movements. And it's interesting enough, in many Islamic countries, the leaders of these movements, like India, are women, like Hindu India, where so many of the leaders of the environmental movement are these remarkable women. There are a lot in the Islamic world, in Egypt, in Iran, and Pakistan, and Tunisia, many countries, there are women, but not all women. Of course, there are also some men. The environmental movement began, and gradually people became interested in rediscovering what Islam had to say about this matter. This is the point where my own humble writing, because I've been writing about this a great deal, about the Islamic view of nature, of science, of application of science to nature, relation between man and nature, and so forth. A lot of interest began to be shown in this matter, not only in Persian and Arabic, the main language of Islam, but also in Turkish, Urdu, other Islamic languages. And gradually, more and more during the last few decades, there has been an awareness of the presence of an alternative philosophy about nature, about human beings, and the relationship with nature, which of course is theocentric. Islam is a religion in which God is present everywhere. It is rooted in the awareness of the reality of God as both the creator of nature and the creator of human beings. Now, let me point to, just a few minutes, just a few of the main points which the Islamic view of nature presents. First of all, the thesis of Lynn White and many Western scholars who bunch together all the Abrahamic religions as being against the understanding of nature and so forth. This is false. Islam is a sister religion of Christianity, but in the field of nature, as its views are very different, very, very different. That's why for centuries, Christians who were opposed to Muslims called them naturalists, that people do not believe in the supernatural and so forth. Whereas in Islam, of course, we believe in the supernatural, but the supernatural is sort of has penetrated into the natural order. The two are not totally separated. And this is to be found in the everyday life of Muslims. For example, a Christian has to find an altar in a church to participate in the Eucharist and have the Mass. A Muslim can pray anywhere on earth where permission is given, as long as it's clean, anywhere. By that lake that I see the picture of behind that lady, could stop there and say his or her prayers. So we have this another view of nature. It's not just what Westerners have written about the whole Abrahamic tradition. Even the view of Judaism and Christianity are not exactly the same. The whole question of sacrifice of kosher food, of relation to animals, this is not my subject, but is not identical. But let me just, with the few minutes I have, turn to finish with Islam. First of all, Islam begins with the view that God created man, of course, like Christianity, that is Homo, the primal human being. And I, the person who is supposed to be an Islamic thinker, I do not believe in the theory of evolution at all. I believe it's a replacement for cutting off the hands of God, the creator, and his creation. And I've written a great deal about that. I don't want to get into that, but that's another argument. In the Islamic point of view, God is directly responsible for the life of his creatures. has created the human being, given him or her, here the question of man is both, it's like anthropos, mean man and woman. Given man two very, very important powers. One is being the representative of God on earth, Khalifatullah fil ard. We're the only creatures in the world that can bring about extinction of other creatures by will. You can kill, look how many species we destroyed. All the snakes in the world, all the alligators in the waters of Africa cannot do that. All the elephants roaming and breaking trees in Zimbabwe, they cannot do that. Only we have the power, a God-given power, to destroy God's creation. But in order not to do that, this power that God has given us, we have a second power which brings with this responsibility, and that is to be Abdullah, to be the servant of God. No human being has a right to being a Khalifatullah, a Caliph of God, a vicegerent of God, without being the servant of God. In a sense, from the Islamic point of view, the tragedy of modern man is that he wants to be the Caliph of God, Khalifatullah, without being God's servant. He wants to live happily in forgetfulness of God. And that is not a possibility. That's not how we were created from the Islamic point of view. So there's a double aspect to human life, that of power, domination, possibility of playing in a godlike role in the world, combined with surrender to God as God's servant and obeying his laws, and therefore being a protector for his creation. And here I want to turn to the second point. According to Islamic teachings, of course, it's not that God created man and man created the nature, of course. God created all creatures himself. But if you take his creation to be like a house, man is like the window of that house through which the light of the sun shines. If that window darkens, the whole room darkens. That is the spiritual suicide of modern man that began in Western Europe in the 17th century, was going to affect the coral reefs in the Caribbean 3 centuries later. And we see right before our eyes. Why are the coral reefs dying? They're dying because of what Newton and Galileo said in the beginning of the 17th century, to trace all the steps, step by step, until we get to the death of the coral reefs in Australia or in the Caribbean. So on the one hand, man is the window through which the light of God shines into the world. If man's heart has become darkened, and that window has become black through which no light shines, the whole cosmos darkens. From another point of view, all cosmic beings have a direct relation to God independent of us. And they're there as reminders of who we are. And that is therefore, it's therefore very important. Let me conclude with this point, my time is up, that the word A-Y-A-H, Ayah in Arabic, is the name of the verse of the Quran. It is also the name for all phenomena of nature. And all phenomena of nature are seen as sign of God. And therefore, they're a kind of cosmic Quran. And the Quran is very explicit about this. In the verse in which it says, we shall show them our ayat, the same word, as signs or symbols, within themselves and upon the horizons, until it becomes manifest unto them that it is the truth. And so Islam has a very extensive and vast treasury of teachings on the environment, from the practice of traditional architecture to metaphysical books about the nature of reality, from which you can draw. And is right now in the middle of the struggle that everyone in the world is actually, between going back to the truths which have allowed it to function as a great civilization, which have allowed human beings to live for hundreds of thousands of years on Earth, at the same time faced with the challenges which, of course, the modern world brings about. As a Persian, now not as a person living in America, I believe that the program that Dr. Seyyed and others have created like this, these should be reflected back into the Oriental world and will play a very important role in India, in Iran, in Egypt, God knows where. Because people there, although they sometimes react against the West, they always watch to see what the West is doing. And especially this disease that began in the West, they want to see what kind of vaccine they found for it. And so I hope very much that this program, which also has participants from India, ASEAN, Hawaii, and other parts of the world, will also reach the rest of the world, and especially the Islamic world. I'm sure it will have many, many readers. Thank you very much, or hearers. My time is up.
Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Nasr, we have a question for you. Interesting question. It said, where does this idea that for development, we have to destroy nature, where does that idea come from? Can you give us your idea?
First of all, the very word development. In the Middle Ages or in the 17th century, in French or English, développement in French or development in English, it didn't mean what we mean by today. Development as a kind of expansion of economic activity, of human activity, of growing, always development, always connected with growing, with bigger, quantitatively bigger, really comes with the idea of evolution in the 19th century. That nature, by the fact that follow time itself, is expanding, evolving, and evolving always higher, and you have the question of development. Development, even today, because it has both meanings in it. You can say, for example, I developed my art of playing the harpsichord. Yes. But most of the time you say development, it means a kind of growth, a kind of expansion. And it has this quantitative aspect related to it. And the whole disaster from which we're suffering now is that we're trying to fit infinite expansion into finite space. In physics, that's impossible, but we're trying to do it. All the countries are trying to develop. Every government, from American to Russian, they talk about percentage of development. How can you develop indefinitely in a world which is finite? That's why national products and things like that, which are always based on quantity and always on expansion and the identification of development with quantity. These are things which are not only anathema spiritually, they're also catastrophe for the environment, absolute catastrophe. If all of the reptiles in America developed like the factories developed, everybody in the United States would be stung by rattlesnakes that would do no American left, obviously. Nature, in fact, is against development in that sense. It's based on harmony, under interrelation of development. Yes, a little baby chick develops into a big chick, not in that sense, but the idea of all things growing indefinitely, that's not how nature was made. No forest could survive like that. If a tree just kept growing and growing and growing ad infinitum, it would not be a tree. All of nature, in fact, is against indefinite development. It's an invention mentally that goes back to the 19th century in the West again, it began in Europe. And the sooner we face it, the better. When the word words came out, languages like Persian and Arabic, I know a few words in those languages, had trouble translating it. In the Persian, the word tosa'a, which means expansion, is used. Which means exactly the idea of development as expansion, and we're getting getting bigger and bigger. So yes, this is a very, very major problem, and I think we'll all have to face it. And I think those people who deal with the environment should all be brave enough to face these issues face on, and not just jump over them, because it's very dangerous. Then it brings out the illusion that we can find solutions to the problem by evading the difficult parts. And that's not right.
Thank you for your insight, Dr. Nasr.
You're quite welcome.
I'll direct the next question to Swami Atmavidyananda ji. Swamiji, the question is also another big one, a small sentence, but a big one. Swami, could you say more about what we can do to repair the planet? Swamiji, I give that to you.
Yes, thank you for this question. In the Vedic literature, there are various methods to repair the system, to maintain harmony. For example, one of the best system to restore the forces of nature which we have polluted, like earth, water, fire, even the soil. So how to restore this balance? There is a process of called yajna or fire ceremony. So that is part of our daily life, that everybody is doing sacrifice. So offering some herbs with some mantras into the holy fire, and the fire which creates the smoke, which is not a smoke from the chemicals, but it is the herbal. So it creates healthy, healthy clouds, which are like tonic. So healthy clouds bring more healthy rain, and if there is good rain, there will be good harvest. And consuming that harvest, our overall health will, mental and physical health will be much better to achieve the goal of our life and live in harmony with this whole creation. So this is a cycle to restore the balance of ecology. Yajna is recommended, and the small form of yajna is known as Agnihotra, which takes hardly 5 to 7 minutes every morning, and every householder was supposed to practice this. And also organic farming, that instead of using too much of chemicals to destroy the fertility of our soil, better to use cow dung, cow urine, and there are some other products like neem leaves. So making the fertilizer with that. So we used to survive on those methods for hundreds of years, and suddenly this new development came up. So we have to go back to those value system. I don't deny with the modern development. We use that because it is a science. So keeping an approach of applying the practical method of the modern science, and also the value system which is helping us and which is needed. So combining this approach, definitely we can bring a change to and restore this ecological system. It is not too far. We still have control to change it.
Thank you very much, Swamiji. Dr. Nelson, I'll direct the next question to you. How can indigenous knowledge and philosophies, how can they inspire and help us to move beyond the strong, polarized conversations and political division which are destroying the US society? Can you please speak on that?
Well, excellent question. Very, very profound. A lot of indigenous philosophies do not have such strong either or thinking, black and white binary thinking. We know that life is fluid and dynamic, and that there are many different ways of knowing and being in the world. And so we have our trickster characters that almost all tribes have, that shows us to embrace difference and to embrace contradiction even, and not to see that as polarizing fighting, but to see that we're on a spectrum. So the trickster icon or trope, if you will, really shows us to look for the middle path, the gray zone, and to be able to embrace opposition without becoming an opponent. That's actually a paraphrase from a Taoist teaching. The true path of the peacemaker is to oppose opposition without becoming an opponent, right? Kind of a koan. And so Native teachings are very much about wait, listen, do not practice humility. We have a saying, you haven't walked in their moccasins. We don't know what their life path has been. We have to respect even our enemies, especially our enemies, because we need to understand them. So we must listen, we must be humble, we must try to find common ground. And I know it's very difficult right now with how polarized our country is, but we need to meet people as human beings and try to find that common ground. And Native philosophies teach us not to judge too quickly, to always keep learning, to be humble, to have compassion for those who have different views and opinions than our own, so that we can learn together. We are all human beings on this sacred Mother Earth, and we must live together. So that's a big philosophical one. Then there's the issue of, the political tumult in this country right now that I won't take up too much time, but that's a conversation for all of us to see how we can befriend the enemy in this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nelson. We have the last question for Dr. Nasr. This comes from Dr. Ayesha Legari Ali. And the question is, please explain the concept of fitra in Islam. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, but fitra.
What?
Fitra. Yes.
Fitra. With pleasure. Fitra means primordial nature and is related to the word for creation, fatara in Arabic. And fitra means the primordial nature in which God created us, and we still carry within ourselves. Yuladul insana ala al-fitra. Man is born in a state of fitra, which means a kind of not only primordial presence in time, but also in substance coming from the hands of God, being God's perfect creature that God created it. All our imperfections are accretions through time, which gloss over and cover our fitra. Now, the important thing from the point of Islamic anthropology is that according to Islam, we don't believe in original sin as Christian theology does. We believe that that fitra, that primordial nature, which by its own nature is close to God, open to Tawheed, open to the unity of God, that nature we all carry still within ourselves. But through fall of the flow of time over the ages, gradually this has been more and more covered up and less accessible to ordinary human beings. But it's still there. It's by virtue of our fitra that we are able to go back to God and to oneness, to Tawheed. Why is it that there's something in you and I that yearns for God? Is because of our fitra. And why is it in some people there is no that yearning? It's because that fitra is covered actually by the dross of the flow of time, you might say, if we can use a poetic expression. But the fitra is always there. Islam believes that all human beings, by virtue of being human beings, in the same have the seal of divine unity. Seal of divine unity mark their heart, mark the center of their being. So in the center of our being, we're always in relation with the divine. And that is the fitra. And human life, including religion, its goal is try to go back to our fitra, to discover our fitra. And this is also very, very similar. I don't want to talk about in front of the Swami about Hinduism, but of course to certain doctrines of the Advaita Vedanta, which is at the heart of Sufi metaphysics and spirituality.
Thank you, Dr. Nasr. The next question, maybe tying in with that, this is for Swamiji. It says, Swami, Tatvamasi is translated as thou art that. How do you incorporate that in the life of a yogi and in the context of our discussion today on spiritual ecology? Tatvamasi.
Tattvamasi, this is the great commandment from the Upanishad, and it means thou art that, you are that. So that indicates God the Absolute. You are part and parcel of that divinity. So bring this attitude. This is not just to say, contemplate on this, that you are that. You are not separate from God. You are that. So once we bring this attitude with contemplation, it reflects in our thoughts, words, and action. We start perceiving oneness with the whole creation. And that is where it helps us to deal with nature, not as separate, but it is part of me. If it is part of me, I cannot destroy it. I cannot cut my own hand. So Tattvamasi, to feel oneness with God within and then everywhere, it's a play of consciousness.
Thank you, Swamiji. I have a question for Dr. Nelson. This seems to have two parts. What do you believe is the role of the growing dysfunction of the collective ego on the imbalances we see and we discussed today? And how do we deal with raising this consciousness, especially in children, within the educational systems?
Thank you. I think, the ego has to be deconstructed, right? This ego that has been developed, I would say, especially in America, and maybe with the European roots, as Professor Nasr mentioned, the construction of the scientific self as a separate entity, a knower that can dissect nature, that is superior to nature, that is really focused on materialism and consumption. That ego is very destructive. And especially here in America, we need to deconstruct and transform that ego. And it doesn't make people happy either, right? The more you consume, the more you want more. It's the nature of desire. People are depressed. People are on antidepressants. The suicide rates are high. Consumption does not make you happier. Being rich doesn't make you happier. So people need to have an insight and an experience that kind of egoing is actually self-destructive, not only destructive to the planet, but it's not helpful to oneself, unless they have a narcissistic personality, right? That really thrives on that. It's that Wendigo spirit I talked about from our traditional stories. It's a cannibal. It can only feed on everything. It's insatiable. And so I think once we're in community, once we're in family, once we be of service to others, service to the environment, go out and clean up a river like this behind me, pick up pollution, go grow food, distribute food to the elderly, to children. There's a lot of eco-literacy programs for young kids. Get kids off the computer, off the screen, out into the trees, out into the forest, out into a little urban park, learn about the butterflies, the caterpillars, the transformative beauty of natural life. And I think we need to get out of our own heads, so to speak. One of my dear friends, Brock Dahlman, is a great wordsmith and a water wizard, restoration ecologist. He says, we need to restore ecosystems, true, but we need to restory the headwaters of our ego system. So we need to restory the headwaters of our ecosystem is more important, because that's upstream thinking. Then the watershed will be restored downstream. So hope that was helpful. Thank you for the great question.
Thank you for the ecosystem concept. Interesting, thank you. Dr. Nasr, this will be the last question, and then we'll pass the word on later to Swami Atmavidyananda for closing remarks. But Dr. Nasr, what do you suggest we do as responsible, single individuals, identities living in this Western mindset? What can we do?
First of all, you might say God's grace is such that there's no place on earth where you're placed where there's not a sky above you. The path to the divine, to the transcendent, to the spiritual is always open to us wherever we are. Some places it's have greater access, some places less, but there's no place in which you can make the excuse that there's no sky above our head, if I can talk metaphorically. And therefore, I think as individuals, those who feel disoriented, who do not know what to do in life, should most of all try to be true to themselves and try to not lose hope, try to find a way, and try to accept the certitude that without an ultimate meaning, there is no real meaning to life. And that a life without meaning is a very difficult one to lead. And so even to be selfish, one should have a goal. And so they should do so with honesty towards themselves, which is a very, very important thing. For those who are people of faith, each faith provides a plethora of means of realization of our being in relation to God, in relation to nature, in relation to other human beings, the three grand realities that we face as individuals. And even in a world such as ours, in which so many religions have been eclipsed, there's so much pseudo-spirituality going around, in which there's so much atheism, denial of the divine principle, in which there's so much ugliness, and I could go on and on. Even in this world, there are a lot of still very beautiful things. There's still grace, the means of access to the divine. There's the beauty of nature that one still has access to, beauty of sacred art, whether it be music or architecture to which we have access. And we should try our best to fill our life with meaning by drawing towards those elements, all of which really comes from God's mercy and grace towards us, that draw our soul. Not everyone is interested in everything, obviously, but try to find something, from taking a walk in the woods to listening to a Gregorian chant, if you're a Westerner. Try to find something that attracts the soul, that nourishes it and helps it. Well, is it philosophical, theological, artistic, social, whatever it is. And also for those who are believers, it's very, very important to not to lose one's nexus, one's line to the divine, to pray. Let me conclude this beautiful verse of the great Persian poet, Jalaluddin Rumi, who says, between every human being and his Lord, there is a link which cannot be described and cannot be qualified. There's a link that links us to our own divine principle. Source of all happiness, of all joy, of all peace comes from actually clinging to that link, to that rope of hope, of mercy that comes from God. And all sadness comes really from ego which closes upon itself. Against that is it divinizes itself, considers itself to be the absolute and final reality. And one just prays that with the world being what it is, that those who can at least open the door for those whom they can help. But there are always people who search, and even they who cannot find meaning, the most important thing is to be true to themselves. The great Jewish mystic and rabbi Ben Ezra, Middle Ages, said it best of all, above all, to thine own self be true. That's all I have to say.
That's all, and that's everything. Dr. Nasr, thank you for the beautiful quote from Rumi as well. Swamiji, I'll be passing the word over to you for the closing remarks.
Thank you all. It was a great session with Dr. Nasr and Dr. Melissa. On behalf of Kriya Yoga Institute, we would like to thank the FIU Stephen J. Green School of International and Public Affairs for this opportunity to participate in this important program to raise consciousness about the future of our planet. With a mindset of wholeness, we become aware that all of humanity together with the natural world make up for this wonderful living organism that we call home. The speakers today spoke from different traditions, but in truth, they spoke with one voice. Our spiritual master, Paramahansa Yoganandaji, came to United States from India 100 years ago to help bridge the East and West, to raise the consciousness of harmony for the entire earth under heaven. Today's call to action is a call to transform ourselves and our world to live this deeper harmony. All are one. Today is the call to action. I would like to conclude this with a Vedic prayer, praying for all. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May everyone be happy. May everyone be healthy. May everyone see auspiciousness. May no one have a share in sorrow. Let there be no suffering. Let there be more love, peace, harmony among us and in this whole creation. Thank you very much for participating in this program.
The final closing, I just want to thank all of our speakers, our moderator, and all the faculty, staff, and personnel at FIU and Kriya Yoga who work so hard to produce these programs. Please register and log on tomorrow at 10 a.m. each day through September 24th. There should be a link appearing on your screen for continuing dialogues with illuminating speakers on critical regional and planetary issues, hosted by the Kimberly Green Latin American and Caribbean Center and the Department of Religious Studies. Thank you for your participation. Be safe, be well.